I've been obsessed with these Holbein Irodori Gouache. They are perfect for painting nature scenes. My trip around Jeju Island earlier this summer led me from botanical gardens in full bloom to shores wrapped in fog. And these paints have inspired me to dive both into painting mysterious mist and clouds and very summery pastel florals. I had 2 sketchbooks with me, a larger one for elaborate mixed media sketches and a tiny hardcover one that could fit everywhere. While I usually also carry watercolors and gouache with me, I soon realized that there would be little time for them and reduced my sketching luggage to mostly colored pencils, the bare essentials. My goal was to sketch on location and leave the colors for later, as I was traveling with my parents who were visiting Korea from Switzerland. So I was busy being travel guide and chauffeur and wanted to enjoy family time, of course. Often, like at Boromwat, where I sketched hydrangeas, these very quick sketches can take less than 5 minutes. So perfect for trips done as a group or very active vacations. I really recommend actually sketching on location though. Even just the rough lines to capture a composition make my sketches feel more tangible than if I relied only on pictures we took on that trip. I'd already shared first impressions of this gouache color palette and the first steps of this hydrangea painting in my recent art vlog, but never gave them proper color swatches. I sat down at night to finish this garden scene and started with tiny color swatches to get a better feel for each paint in this set. The spring set comes with bright pastel shades, though without leaning too sugary sweet, very much still focused on landscapes. I'm quite surprised to see no sakura pink shade immediately, as that was my first association with a set of colors inspired by spring in Japan, though maybe that's just me thinking in clichés. Spring here in South Korea goes through very distinct phases too, after all. Cherry blossom season looks completely different than the fresh green and warm yellows that follow just weeks later, or even end of May when colors go deeper and nature is truly alive. Do you have color associations with not just seasons, but specific months? I often feel like nature looks completely different even week to week, and I hope some of that change comes across if you watch my landscape and travel sketching videos over time. As you can see, these shades are all quite saturated. Yes, they are spring-themed light with hints of pastel here and there, but instead of going for a very milky, toned-down pastel, there's still vibrancy to this palette. Looking at the pigments in these shades, there are actually quite a few here I'm unfamiliar with, along with well-known ones like PY3, Hansa Yellow Light, which can be found in both yellow shades, the Carrier Japonica Yellow and the lighter and cooler Lemon. The light ochre shade Oudo is a mix of both natural and synthetic yellow iron oxide, and the synthetic yellow iron oxide also shows up in the silver grey. Pale Patina and Seedling both contain PG7, Phthalo Green, and PY3 Hansa Yellow Light, so that Hansa Yellow pigment is included in 4 shades total for this set. All of the shades in the spring set are made from 1 to 3 pigments with a heavier focus on the mixed pigment paints, often including PW6 Titanium White for that opaque, lighter pastel finish. Both blue shades, for example, contain Titanium White and Ultramarine Blue, and then PB60 Eindanfrin Blue for the Myosotis blue shade, and PB16 phthalo turquoise in the case of the Dayflower blue. So there's quite a bit of overlap, which can mean that these will mix very harmoniously. The violet shade Bellflower contains titanium white and one of my favorite violet pigments, the dioxazine violet PV23, which is really intense, though sadly not very light fast. Remembering that, I looked at the light fastness ratings of these gouache paints. Overall, you'll have to be careful using these for finished art. Personally, I use gouache paints in sketchbooks, so I have no issue with fading colors and light sensitivity. They rarely get exposed to sunlight anyway, but I do want to mention it here. While titanium white is already mixed into 6 of these 12 colors, I decided to use an additional white paint with this limited palette anyway to have more flexibility when mixing. So what I mostly did for my hydrangea flowers was mixing different combinations of those violet and blue shades with the vermilion and both greens to kind of brighten them or tone down the saturation. And then both the grey and the white that I added were great for mixing with these. The Holbein gouache are very opaque when fresh out of the tube, but I got these mini sets as a gift to try out, so I don't have the actual paints, and creating completely opaque layers is easiest whenever I add fresh white paint to them. You can still create quite opaque layers with the dry paints reactivated, but it's definitely a bit more work. It creates an overall softer look that I quite liked for these flowers. While painting, I couldn't help but think, again, that a pale pink or some kind of magenta would have been a great addition to this palette. The pale coral is actually an orange pigment mixed with titanium white, and the vermilion also contains yellow and orange pigments for a very warm red. For a more complete palette, I'd have shifted one of these two colors a shade or two cooler. And that's not just for the cherry blossom association, but really just about color mixing in general. The two blues also lean a bit warm, so yeah, a cool tone to balance that would have been great. I completely understand that these are themed, limited palettes though, and often working within a restraint can create more interesting results. If you're looking for an Irodori gouache set, but a more complete color selection, the summer set has a more traditional feel with primary shades, and even a black and white. So among the 4 seasons, that one is probably the best option if you're getting your very first gouache paint, but still want to try these Irodori ones. I really regret using some black paint though. I have a tube of that around and I thought I wanted to up the contrast underneath those hydrangea blooms. And I think it kind of just destroyed the soft color contrast I'd built up. I'm kind of sad I caved and tried that. But generally adding just a black and white paint tube to one of these sets, especially a white, might be really helpful and make them more versatile. As I used some more watery paint layers, I mostly reached for this watercolor brush by Escoda. It's one of my long-time kind of favorites. It has enough tension to handle these reactivated gouache paints. And while it's fine to use with the fresh white paint straight out of the tube, I wouldn't be using this if all my paints were really heavy and fresh. So yeah, not a gouache brush, definitely a watercolor brush, but I found it worked really well here. As this is a mixed media paper, I wasn't sure how much water I could use before it would buckle or dissolve right under me. I didn't notice any issues here, but as you can see, I used just a tiny brush and very small quantities of paint and water as I was trying to get a feel for this new sketchbook and the new art supplies. I'm not using just a single reference image, but multiples. I find out for sketches that I started on location, I prefer a bit of movement in my references, so that I don't get bogged down by details. I used a few different angles and close-up shots from that Hydrangea garden, switching back and forth, and also looped a bit of my video footage. If you, like me, don't always have time to finish a sketch on location, I found this to be the approach that gets closest to that feeling of being there, of capturing what we saw during the initial sketch. That same night, I couldn't resist also sketching a little bit more on this very first view I'd already started in my sketchbook while on the go. I was now using the winter color palette, the second set that I have, and I just wanted to get a quick first impression of these paints as I was just so curious. But when I use yet unfamiliar paints, I do like to have proper daylight so that I can actually see what I'm doing, what I'm painting. So the next morning I did some detailing with the Derwent drawing colored pencils, which layer quite nicely over gouache paint. And then it was time to head into the mist. June on Jeju Island wasn't yet too hot, and the rainy season never actually came. So, perfect to show my parents around the island. They'd never seen Jeju in summer, and so I was more than happy to play tourist myself. We visited Udo, an even tinier island right next to Jeju, from where we could see a beautiful view of Songsan Ilchulbong, the sunrise peak volcanic crater, enveloped by clouds. I quickly tried to capture the shoreline and cloud shapes while we ate ice cream. The constant shifting of the clouds was fascinating to sketch, though of course, with the constant movement, also quite difficult. This was my very first sketch in this mixed media journal I'd gotten for this trip, my previous travel sketchbook finally full and me craving a larger format. For so many years, anything that I would take outside to sketch had been A6 or at most A5 in format, and I felt ready to tackle larger formats. Even if I don't fill entire pages with a single illustration, I want to have the option of adding color swatches or creating combinations of different scenes that would go together or contrast with each other. Just some new challenges, new explorations. As you can see, I was using the Garandash CMYK plus white color palette that I'd also used for sketches from Switzerland. It's just been my go-to set for a lot of outdoor sketching for months and months and months now, so maybe I was feeling a bit bored or at least a bit uninspired. It's definitely a very great color selection to paint pretty much anything compared to the more restrained Irodori sets, as you can mix nearly any color with these 5 paint tubes. But yeah, I was craving some kind of new influence or some kind of new input. Udo has adorable shops all along the shore. I regret not getting this Jeju-themed journal, but I did grab a couple cute capybara pens as gifts and for myself. Then, in the afternoon, we moved inland to avoid the crowded chaos of the beaches and cafes. And the ocean fog rolled in to follow us. It turned this sunny, vibrant island into a mysterious, quiet place, swallowing sound and light, though still humid and hot. I was even a bit worried we wouldn't be able to take the boat back home that evening. The ocean fog is called Hemu in Korean, and it shaped my impression of this early summer, as we never had this consistent daily wave of fog before. It created magical landscape views that constantly shifted and changed, and lighting that never stayed the same for more than a few minutes. And I hope I can learn how to paint scenes like this, blurry, dissolving into nothing. It's with that fog, Hemu, in mind that weeks later, when I finally had some free time, I tackled this sketch of Songsan Il covered in clouds, with the Holbein Irodori Gouache set. I just thought that palette would be the perfect fit for this foggy, cloudy scene. The winter palette is all about cooler tones, of course, but has a surprising variety of warm browns and even reds too. Despite being themed around winter, to me it brought to mind these hot and humid summer days swallowed by mist. Let's take a look at these paints because I'm obsessed with this palette and there are some unique shades to find in here. First, the Crimson PR83, a genuine alizarin crimson, my probably most used red when painting with acrylics, so I love that it shows up here. I was surprised to see it though. But while this set is of course inspired by Japanese winters, it also fits Jeju's winter impression a lot. The crimson immediately bringing to mind the camellia flowers blooming in January. Then we have two synthetic red iron oxides to bring warmth to this palette. Dark brown, which also contains synthetic red iron oxide, but also a yellow and black pigment, gives us a cooler brown to contrast. Patina is a phthalo green, and while one could think that the pale patina of the spring palette is just this plus titanium white, the pale patina also contains a yellow pigment, so this pure one here is much cooler. Then my favorite, russet green, a free pigment mix of diarylite yellow, nitroso green and more alizarin crimson. This even granulates beautifully for gouache and mixes the most gorgeous warm green shades. The two blues are both mixes of phthalo blue and phthalo green and bring us our first inclusion of titanium white here, which lightens and softens the geisha blue. A surprising shade, Peony, a deep magenta violet color, which can be used to mix with the greens as a complementary color or with the two phthalo blues for violets. A really interesting grey is included here with the Rikyu grey, which also contains the nitroso green and some naphthol red, as well as titanium white. for an overall green-gray hue. And then there's a blue-black, a color quite similar to a Payne's gray. The antique gold is incredibly brilliant and I love the warm undertone this one has. I definitely prefer it to the antique silver, which is quite a bit less intense. Here too, I combined the palette with my own permanent white paint tube, both for giving me more flexibility while color mixing and to have one wet paint to go with these dried gouache. This palette is a lot to take in at first, so I thought trying it out on a landscape that's heavy on warm browns, shades of green and bright blues, but with grey tones all over, would be great to get more comfortable with it. I'm feeling a bit ridiculous with my tiny flat brush here. All my brushes were bought with my small A6 travel sketchbooks in mind, so suddenly painting on a larger format feels quite strange. I'll have to grab at least one larger brush at the art store soon, as my acrylic brushes are too stiff for these paints. This page was all about first tries. My first try with that spring palette, the winter palette, and the paper itself. As it is a mixed media paper, so thinner than the watercolor papers of my past travel sketchbooks, I had to be a bit more careful about using water. It also has a fine texture, which I think showcases gouache really beautifully. One reason I chose this sketchbook over others was the paper color. It's not quite a super bleached white, but it's also not an eggshell color. My Talent's art creation sketchbook, which I also carried around on these day trips around Jeju, has a very yellow paper color. In comparison, the Strathmore mixed media is much more neutral and much easier to scan. As I want to collect all my Jeju summer landscapes in an art scene, like I did with my Switzerland sketches, scanning and editing are at the back of my mind as a consideration when choosing paper. As I was looking into these Irodori Gouache sets more, I encountered multiple reviews mentioning their surprise at the patina color or the two red-pink shades. I hadn't considered those out of place. The green brought to mind cold lakes in a winter landscape, or even the green shimmer of ice and glaciers, as, for example, this painting by Swiss artist Caspar Wolf shows. Or in the context of a Japanese winter, maybe the mineral water of onsen. And like I mentioned, I associated the crimson with camellia flowers that only bloom in winter, especially since the Camellia japonica is more pink than the warmer Jeju camellia variant. And the peony shade as a mixing color for violet shadows and neutralized greens also made sense to me. But while looking at depictions of Japanese winter, I stumbled over quite a lot of illustrations that made the inclusion of bright reds even more logical and simple. In a snow-covered winter landscape, temples, shrines, and other traditional architecture would stand out in its bright red. I hadn't even considered that as an inspiration, since Korean temples have a pale green undertone, more like the patina shade, but it would make a lot of sense if paintings of winter like these inspired some of the color selection. While painting this scene in particular, I didn't need yellow. I just mixed the two colors that contained yellow pigments, the dark brown and russet green, with my white paint to create those lighter, warmer tones. But this might be the shade you either need to add your own paint tube for, be it a yellow ochre or a proper yellow, or that makes this palette a limited one. You'll see me tackle that in some of my future painting videos, as I've already finished multiple sketchbook pages using this winter set by the time I'm editing this one, experimenting using the antique gold, complementary color contrasts and the russet green to create impressions of yellow. I feel like something clicked for me painting this landscape. Maybe the color palette is just a great fit for my art style, or it was the use of looping video footage as a reference again, but I'm really happy with how loose yet finished this one looks. The final touches with pure, dense white paint were incredibly satisfying. And I used my Derwent drawing pencils for some hints of texture on the rocks and tiny details like shrubbery in the distance. And it all flowed together very naturally. Have you tried any of these Irodori Gouache sets? Do you have a favorite? Because I love these two so much, I recently actually went out and bought the autumn set as well, and I'm beyond excited to try that one out. Though I do have to finish these summer travel sketches first, so I can make a little art scene out of them, so I haven't even been able to try them yet. As you can probably sense from this video, while I enjoy both of these palettes and think the Holbein Gouache with their very opaque paint and the layers that don't crack but build up beautifully are a great product overall, it's the winter set that has completely captured my heart. It has inspired me to pick up these paints and this sketchbook every single day lately, and I hope you're as excited as I am to see how my landscapes evolve over the next few videos, as I learn so much about color mixing, contrast, and even paint pigments. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in my future gouache and travel sketching videos.